Hello, and thanks for joining me. Who wants to talk about the future? um, I just finished reading this book, Conversations with the Future, 21 Visions for the 21st Century by Nikola Danaylov. Can you see that cover? I'm in the room with the windows, so it's got a glare. But yeah. So I decided to go ahead and read this book. This book was not originally on my 2017 TBR, my reading plan. And I like to stick to my plan because I like to get the most from my reading time that I possibly can. And I find that I do that when I more or less stick to a plan, but I do leave myself a little wiggle room in there for some books that come along in the year that I want to go ahead and read. And the book that I read immediately prior to this, Thoughts from the Dark Corner, was also one off my reading plan, and this one was off my reading plan. But as it turned out, these two books were paired really well together. So there was a sort of a serendipity with those that I found wonderful, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. But what this book's about, this is by Nikola Danaylov, who has a YouTube channel called I think it's called Singularity Weblog, Singularity 101. I'll put a link to it down in the details. And that YouTube channel, I've been sort of following that for the last couple of years. He interviews people on his channel, thinkers, really thinkers and futurists about different aspects of the future that we might see, mainly around technology. So things like artificial intelligence and the singularity. And so this book is 20, basically some interviews with some of these thinkers and all sorts of topics, and the singularity, artificial intelligence, like I said, consciousness, Bitcoin, even the economy. How the economy might be impacted by change. Zero marginal cost society. So stuff like this, longevity, transhumanism, posthumanism. So lots of different topics explored in this book. And, I just love this kind of thing. I just love reading about these possible futures that we might have. And I've always sort of enjoyed futurism. I actually subscribed to Omni Magazine back in the early 80s. And Omni Magazine is actually where the term technological singularity hit the public consciousness. As an idea, it had been around before, but Vernor, the science fiction author Vernor Vinge, actually coined that term, technological singularity, in an article he wrote in Omni Magazine back in 1983. So just as a general idea of what the singularity is, it means different things, is defined differently by different people. But the original concept from back in 1983, this is the quote from Omni Magazine: "We will soon create intelligences greater than our own. When this happens, human history will have reached a kind of singularity, an intellectual transition as impenetrable as the knotted spacetime at the center of a black hole, and the world will pass far beyond our understanding." So, I wish I'd kept all my back issues from the early 80s of Omni, and I might actually have gotten that issue when it came out. But that's sort of a general idea of what the singularity is, and different people sort of interpret when that might be. Some people have thought it could be as soon as the 2020s, 2045. I've heard. So there's different time periods. Some people think it will never happen. And some people think maybe like 100 years, but it's the point in time really when artificial intelligence or machine intelligence equals and then surpasses human intelligence, and then of course the world as we know it would change. So part one of this book is set up, it sort of defines and discusses what the singularity is, and then it also has 10 reasons to fear it and 10 reasons not to fear it. And then part two of the book is actually these interviews with these different thinkers. So I don't have time to go into all of the thinkers and all of the interviews. There's some really notable people interviewed here, though. I'll just, like Vernor Vinge, like I said, or who came up with the term, he's interviewed. Ray Kurzweil, who wrote The Singularity is Near, Dr. Marvin Minsky, another longtime thinker and along these lines, Noam Chomsky, So Jeremy Rifkin. There's a wide range of thinkers, and like I said, also a wide variety of topics. So some talk about this artificial intelligence, some talk about consciousness, some talk about transhumanism, some talk about Bitcoin, some talk about the economy, some talk about radical life extensions, cryogenetics, freezing upon death. So there's a lot of different aspects of the future that are discussed, related mainly, like I said, around technology. But just to pull a few of them out that I found particularly interesting. Ray Kurzweil is discuss machine learning and the challenges that's faced by AI in achieving sort of human-like intelligence. And he had a quote here that I thought was really cool and related to Magister Ludi, the bead game from Hermann Hesse. So I thought I'd just call it out, because if you saw my video back on the bead game, that book by Hermann Hesse, I think this just fits really well. The quote is, talking about the mammalian neocortex, and how this is a fairly recent evolutionary development among mammals. But he's talking about, its function. He says, it allows us to do hierarchical thinking. So I can put a whole bunch of ideas together and give that a symbol and call that an idea. Then I can use that symbol with other symbols and create another idea. Then I can give that a name with other ideas and create another idea, and I build up this whole hierarchy of ideas and patterns. That is a description of the bead game from Magister Ludi, the glass bead game by Hermann Hesse, which was written in the 1940s. Of course, Hermann Hesse was not talking about machine learning in the book. He's talking about actually this rigorous academic order that is actually synthesizing all human knowledge, and they do this through this game. And this game is is synthesizing these different ideas from these radically different fields, like maybe architecture and philosophy and music, and putting them all together and then creating a symbol for it that gave that symbol, that idea, a symbol. So I thought that was real cool, how that related to how this quote by Ray Kurzweil in this technology-based, 21st century futurist-based kind of nonfiction book related back to this fictional work back from the 1940s by Hermann Hesse. I just thought that was so cool. Another quote from Ray Kurzweil's interview was, our brain creates our thoughts and our thoughts create our brain. How our synopsis of our brain, our brain is actually plastic and changes depending on the requirements that it has and really the thoughts that we give it. And I thought that was real cool too, because that's another thing that relates back to, my YouTube channel, my philosophy of reading, how, you are what you think. And so it's not just a matter of learning technical facts. That is the way to a good life. It's actually the whole, a holistic kind of view of learning. My philosophy of reading, anyway, is that there is something to be gained from all sorts of knowledge, which is one of the reasons why I don't limit myself to genres. I try to read between genres because I feel like I'm exposing myself to the widest range of ideas. So I think that I thought that idea or that quote was very cool as well from Ray Kurzweil. Then, there's a section, an interview with Dr. Natasha Vita-More, and she talks about transhumanism and posthumanism. This is an area that I've been really interested in as well. Transhumanism is this idea of, humans becoming something different, but trans is this sort of intermediate state. Posthuman is where we have changed ourselves to the point that we are not human anymore. Maybe we're living in a machine body or something like this, but we are no longer human as we know it. That's posthuman. Transhumans is beyond human. It's actually a state of human, maybe enhanced in some way. And as technology tends to evolve, we get the ability to change ourselves as even now, with artificial hearts and changing, with eye surgery, giving ourselves vision back, all sorts of interventions that we can do with our biological body that, makes us a little different than a traditional human because we've artificially changed ourselves in some way. So this discussion about transhumanism and posthumanism, I found that really interesting. She did mention one. There was a question in this interview about, is the world really ready for this kind of thing? And I thought her answer to that was a little bit culturally biased. She said, "Well, yeah, some parts of the world are not, but I feel like actually most of the world is not ready to change. It's been my experience that humans are very reluctant to change, and we've seen, recently politically, not just here in the U.S. but also in Great Britain, where if change comes too fast, there's a backlash to that, and people want to retract from change if it occurs too fast. So I'm not sure that just lumping that, Afghanistan and Iran, they're not ready for this, but everyone else is. I thought that was maybe a little culturally biased with that, because I think that generally speaking, humans are very reluctant to change. It's been my experience. Another interview here was by Carl Schroeder, and he's talking about system changes. It's sort of along these same lines that, a system change, like a society is a system. So a society can only change as much as the ones who don't want to change, can hold it back. So, if all the parts of a system do not accept the change or can't keep up with the change, the system itself will settle back down to the sustainability point that most of, where the balance point is between those who are pushing for the change and those who are pushing to not change or to go backwards. There's a balance there, and with the society, this is a system, so the system itself can only proceed, to that point, and that's where it will stay. It will find that balance. So some people may be all ready for transhumanism and AI and this kind of thing. Many people will not be, as we've seen with Brexit and with the election here in the U.S., that, change, sometimes people want to slow that down, and enough of society wants to do that, they will, they'll stop that system from changing or from moving forward. So, I'm running out of time, but the one thing that I really wanted to see brought up in these conversations that I didn't see was about agriculture. I think agricultural change is just it's an institution right now. We're still hunting and gathering, basically, with our agriculture. It's really ready for a revolutionary change that could come with robotics and with indoor farming and the advances in energy, where we could actually produce all of our food organically with no pesticides, internal enclosed system, no erosion, no water wastage. We could actually, feed the world. We have this technology, basically available right now, if it were just implemented. So I'd love to hear more of discussion about that in the future. But I think I'll leave it at that. There's a final quote that I want to leave the chat with that is by the author Nikola Danaylov. And it is, the meaning of being human needs to be rediscovered and redefined in every epoch and by every person again and again. And that's kind of what I try to do with my reading and my channel here is, explore that idea of what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to have a good life? And I think one of the best ways to learn this or to figure this out is to engage with reading and with literature, philosophy, multiple genres, and with all of the knowledge since recorded time. So I think I'll leave the discussion at that, and I will see you again soon. Thanks. Bye.